Well, thank you so much, Liam and Indi. Oh, and here's Serge, just in time. We're just starting, Serge. So yeah, this is Extinction Rebellion Australia, Blockade Australia, talking to Insulate Britain. So,
hello.
Maybe if I could get you, Indi, to. Oh, sorry, is it Indi or Indy?
Indy.
Indy,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't call you the wrong name the whole way through. Okay, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how you got involved in Blockade Australia? Oh God, in Insulate Britain. This is going to need so much editing.
I wish I was involved in Blockade Australia. But we've been watching it over here. It's been amazing news. I'm Indy. Or Indigo. I'm part of Insulate Britain, and I got started in it because I was getting a bit sort of frustrated with the sort of one-off actions that I was planning inside Extinction Rebellion, and wanted to realise that we were onto something, but if we just constantly moved target, then our message was getting diluted and we weren't managed to catch the public eye for long enough. So myself, Liam, a few others, and Roger Hallam, who you might have heard of, we all just sort of got together in a room and sort of got this idea on the go that we would find 120 people to sign a conditional commitment form to say that they would repeatedly block motorways, calling on the government to insulate Britain. And it's like almost a year later now from that, and yeah. I'll pass to Liam.
Yeah, thanks, Indy. I'm Liam, also involved in Insulate Britain. I think I got involved because Indy asked me to. I think it's all Indy's fault. Similar. I think we had this. We'd been talking about stepping it up and doing sort of motorways and that kind of thing for quite a long time, and we never pulled it off, I suppose. I think for me, like, it took a day or two to get my head around the insulation kind of idea, because I'd come in like a week or two, a little bit after that had kind of been discussed. And for me, it was like, definitely, it was important to have this like Overton window shift in terms of speaking directly to the UK public about the task and how much was involved in terms of decarbonisation. And for me, it was about really starting to talk about what was required and what this country needs to do in order to decarbonise effectively. And also, it was like a really positive thing. There was a social justice element to it, which was quite exciting, because I'd been working with another group for about a year, thinking about inequality, doing them some like civil resistance campaigns based around inequality, and we didn't really manage to do anything with it, but this kind of like, it kind of dealt with that as well. It dealt with social justice in terms of fuel poverty, like 3.2 million households here in the UK are fuel poor. So it was great. That was.
So how long did you have between when you started thinking about it and when you started actually blocking the freeways?
I think it's about 6 months, isn't it? Yeah, about 6 months. And that was, we had the plan very early on, but it was trying to convince people that they wanted to be part of the plan. Yes. And I think the story goes that when you're first going up to people saying, oh, we need 120 people to do this, but we've got 4. That's when people are very impressed. And then as you gain momentum, then more people want to join you. And what we found was that once we started forming like regional block teams, so the northeast had a team, well, the north had a team, the southwest had a team, that's when there's like bonds between people in their community are formed, and that's when you can like find people who want to take part more easily, because there's a base, there's a family there.
And do you want to run us through like the thinking, like how the tactic related to winning, basically? Because I mean, I believe the whole thing of doing it in the context of the UN climate talks, like that was part of the thinking.
Yeah, so I think it was hugely mobilising and also an incredibly effective pinch point to be targeting the week of the COP conference in Glasgow. So
yes.
We had Boris Johnson, you know, claiming that he had the best green policy in all of the world, or whatever he thinks he's got. And we were trying to highlight that he's really not doing these sort of simple steps to decarbonise, like the leaky homes of Britain. Yeah, I forgot what the other part of the question was.
Yeah.
I think we were doing talks, and we were basing it on we were kind of, Roger was quite inspired by well, I think actually it was it was there's another member of the team that sort of caught the parallel. We were just talking about different civil rights struggle in America. We were just talking about different stuff, and I think it was Dave who he caught the similarity between the political vulnerability of Kennedy at the time in 1961, where basically he was going. They had a big conference with the USSR, Khrushchev, and Kennedy was doing a PR tour around the world saying like, we're the good guys, you know, like we're the leaders of the free world, blah blah blah. And obviously the Freedom Riders campaign started, and before they knew it, after 2 or 3 months, they had 430 people doing hard labor. And it was argued that was highly embarrassing politically for Kennedy at that time. And so one of the team sort of caught on that there was a similarity between Kennedy in the 60s and Boris Johnson in the lead up to COP. So it was just another element that we felt was quite strong. And obviously the idea was to have around 100 people on remand in the run up to COP. And in the end, I think they knew that, so they kind of they didn't give it to us, but maybe we can talk about that later. But that was kind of the idea.
And you were targeting initially this sort of circular freeway thing, which I believe is very hard to go around. Like if you're stuck on it, there's not a lot of way to get off it and go by an alternative route. Is that right?
It's like the big loop around London. It's the M25. It's like infamously horrific and full of traffic, and just like you've got to use it because you can't, otherwise you have to go through London, which is obviously another massive traffic jam. And now we've got zones where you have to pay as well going through London because of their air pollution. But so it's like this idea. I suppose you had a similar thing with the size of that mine by the looks of it, and the expanse of the train line, that when you're trying to block a really specific piece of infrastructure, you can block it for a day. The next day you come back there and it's full of police. Like the print works, they blocked the print works in Broxbourne that distributed the newspapers. Amazing action, like so good. One of XR's best actions. The next day is full on police there, so you can't do that block the same. So the idea was with the M25, that motorway, it's like such an expanse that they could never police the whole thing. I don't know if those mines are that same sort of hugeness, but it looks like to me that you can't police the whole thing. So I think you have to have that factor to it if you want to be returning day after day after day, because otherwise you're going to go, oh no, the police have outwitted us. So you've got to find a target that they can't outwit you for. And I think the other reason for targeting it is like, And I think we're only starting to feel it more now as we kind of embed ourselves in what our actions mean, is that motorway is symbolizing that carbon way of life. It's symbolizing this vast need to consume fossil fuels and to make money. And right now it feels like an ordinary thing that everyone has a right to, you know, drive their kids to and to drive on, which, you know, they do. But I think if we look back at, if we try and think about what the future is going to think of the M25, they're going to think it's disgusting. So I think trying to find that helped me when I was sat on the road, to think that there was a greater reason to it, apart from the massive economic disruption and the massive like political disruption and disruption of the everyday British brain.
Is there anything you want to ask Serge before we about the pre-thinking, before we get into the action and the aftermath? No? Nothing obvious?
Well, putting the demand in the name is interesting. Did you base that on any previous campaigns, and how do you, maybe we're not up to the how do you think it went part, but
Not quite. We'll just go what happened, and then we'll get to that. But do you want to tell us about choosing the name?
Yeah, we kind of ignored it for ages, and yeah, it was like basically retrofit Britain didn't sound as cool as Insulate Britain, but there was concerns about, there was quite a few concerns, and from me, and I think we do need to consider it now, actually, in terms of people were concerned, we've got a problem in the UK, is, I'm not sure what the situation is in Australia, but I would assume it's similar in terms of like the far right and stuff. And people displaced and trying to get here into the UK, and we just had the awful case last few days ago of like 30 people, drowning in the sea trying to get over. And we just like had these, some people were like giving us a hard time about the name. So we did have to really consider that. But in the end, we kind of sort of just went with it because, to try and sort of reclaim it. And we had this idea that we could also insulate Britain with love, with care, with hope, and to try and sort of spin it around. And in the end, it kind of like, it didn't convey in that way in any way, really, at all. It did do what we wanted it to do, which was just like insulate Britain. Like, it's as clear as that. It didn't mean anything else, and people knew it didn't mean anything else. And I think the social justice element to the demand in terms of universal care, it didn't matter where you were from, it didn't matter what colour you were, everybody should be able to live in a kind of a warm, safe home, and that carried, so it worked in the end, I think, mostly. And we obviously, every time people that didn't like us had to say, as Serge pointed out, the demands in the name, so they had to say it every time. And again, that I think that was really effective.
I have a question which I think is actually pretty significant in terms of the lead up. So at some point it was decided that it'd be a separate entity. So this campaign would be separated from other groups in the climate movement, and also had a bit of a separate organizational structure and principles behind it. Can you talk about why you did that, and also, I know it was hard to do, and maybe some of that difficulty.
It wasn't like a sort of decision. It was like we were the outcasts. We were like, let's do something madder and bigger. So it's like we had to just go over on our own and plan it, because I don't know, you know, once you've got an organisation that's been around for ages, it's got loads of systems and circles and bureaucracy and things you have to people you have to back channel and get to agree with you before you can get anywhere. Like sometimes it's really worth going through all of that to get the thing broadcast to everyone and but sometimes you can see you're pushing the boundaries a bit far. You may as well just go and plan it on your own and wait for the people to come to you. And that's what the climate movement, I believe, actually needs to do. It's not this let's all unite around one idea because then we're stronger together. It's actually to divide into really clear things that are experimenting with different ideas and different tactics, and then to almost compete, because that's how we've evolved, is like a competition and an evolution. That's what the climate needs to be doing at the moment, because it's not doing good enough. So we need to create these new groups and challenge each other and herd ourselves slowly into a more radical, proportionate response to the crisis.
Okay, so we move on to what actually happened. I mean, not into detail, but just the sort of general sweep of how it developed and right through to now, if you would. I mean, it's condensing a lot into you know, a shortish bit.
Yeah.
Well, we've got people in prison. Let's say that to begin with.
Yes.
We've got 9 people in prison. That's the end of the story. With many more to come, and we miss them dearly. So that's the backdrop. But Liam, you can do the storytelling.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I was thinking at the time I didn't write enough down in terms of journals or recording the experience, but I've
just
never
roughly,
known
you know, just a broad overview, like not you know, day by day.
I've never known a 7 weeks to feel like, you know, 7 months in all my life, to be quite honest with you. It was so obviously the idea was to get we had around 100 people plus the teams that were working in support, including the strategy, etc., and the media. And so the idea was we kind of did think that after 3 or 4 times that they would kind of snap in terms of reminding us. And in the first week, we definitely, I think it was one of the most effective in terms of disruption. But it was clear, by the second week, it was clear pretty much that they were gonna. I think they understood what we were trying to do, and there was a video on our YouTube page, and if they were smart, they would have looked at it and thought, these people want to go on remand, and you know, we're not gonna give in. But consequently, I think what they tried to do, or certainly the media, what happened is they went in on us really viciously. There was an accident that was indirect. Basically, there was a long traffic jam, and it was miles away from where we were, but there was an accident, and they really tried to sort of go in hard on that. There was a call to a talk radio station that said that somebody had been delayed with their mother for 6 hours, and she'd had a stroke, and consequently she was paralyzed. And we were just getting viciously attacked by the media, going into the second week. And I think what they were hoping for, the authorities and the government, was that we would retreat. And we weren't sure what was going to happen, because obviously we created these block teams, and we told them, look, after the third or fourth time, you'll be remanded. And we were going into the second week, and it was clear they weren't going to do it. So we had to regroup. And basically what materialized, which I think was really interesting, is the spirit that we create. We didn't create it. We obviously created these block teams of 15 to 20 people. And what materialized was this unbelievable, unbreakable spirit, connection and trust with all these people. And so basically you just carried on. And I think the media didn't prepare for us carrying on, and the government didn't. And we went on for so long. We broke through the criticism, and we did become, like I think Roger said, we went onto media and we just went, fuck you, like we're right. And
have you got something, Serge? You said you want to break in
sorry,
with that?
Serge.
Actually segues, but basically, like, yous received an interesting array of repression, and one of them, you know, I'm sure everyone saw the videos of, you know, young and old and all kinds of people being, you know, violently dragged off the street, and they just stayed seated and didn't comply. And when they get dragged off the street, they'd stand up and they'd go back on to get dragged off by, you know, these aggro people. I saw this one image of one of the Insulate Britain protesters was tied to the fence with their own banner from this random person. Can you talk to us about what your training regimen was to prepare for that, or maybe it didn't come out of training, and how that materialized? Because that was incredible, that culture of significant submission.
Someone really great who worked on the MVDA. Well, there's two people actually, two people who kind of planned it initially, and we were like, oh, you know, just give them a some sort of training, and it's got to be an 8-hour training. And at the time I was thinking, 8 hours of training. And it was, and she held her line, and it was 8 hours of training, and thank goodness we did that, because it's like it really did seep into everyone's minds that that you know, to keep that non-violent discipline and to let it happen. And I suppose if you're interested to see it, we can send it over to you, Jane or Sergio, the template. It's good. It's really physical. You scream in each other's faces, you drag each other around. It's not like the theory, it's like, you need this to happen now. You need to channel the really, really angry driver who needs to get their kids to school, and then someone else is there getting dragged around, drowned, and then you swap over. And
it was pretty aggro from quite early on. It was quite aggro from early on, wasn't it?
I think that helped with the spirit as well that we were talking about before. Like, those teams doing that training together really helped to encourage trust and togetherness and stuff like that. Yeah.
So one team would do like one day. Is that how it worked? Like one team would block the freeway at one point on one day, and then another team another day. Is that what the teams would sort of divided up into doing?
No, it's all a whole medley of things. So the first day there was 6 teams out, with 5 teams blocking roundabouts, which is the junction off the motorway, so it creates all the congestion, but you're walking on at red light, and 1 team blocking directly on the highway. And then I think we had all different versions, mainly partly dictated by what we thought was like a good move, and partly by like who was available. So obviously then you go on the road very early in the morning, you're blocking at 8 o'clock traffic, then you're there for however long the blocks were. They were there for hours and hours to begin with, and then by the end, with the police response, it was, some of them were as short as, you know, half an hour or even being intercepted. So then you go into custody. In the UK, you're in custody maximum 24 hours when arrested. But we were finding that, especially as it went on, people were going into custody, blocking at 8, going into custody by, you know, midday or 2 o'clock, and then they were getting let out in the evening. And then they were technically free the next day, but normally then they had an off day and then went back on the road the following day. People saying like, oh, I love that time in custody when I could sit I could relax and sleep. Obviously, it's really, really horrible and stressful for lots of people, but became sort of very familiar with the police because it's the same police going out again and again. It's sort of some counties, so the edge of London is broken up into different counties. Some were quite, you know, understood what we were, and some really, really hated and really made it a really, really horrible time for us. And then of course we glued to the road as well. I don't know what the police response in some countries, that's not appropriate to do because they'll always be ripping you off. But in the UK, gluing has been quite a hard, fast way of sticking where you are with super glue. But we were finding that on the highway, especially the main carriageway of the motorway, police were ripping people off, even elderly ladies. They were ripping them off the road. And yeah, we didn't go down like lock-ons or cars. It was very much about trying to embody, like, your body is the block.
Okay, do you want to just continue the story, one of you? You know, so the second week, it was clear you weren't going to end up in jail or not anytime soon, and the police are a bit surprised, and it's going on and on. So what happened then? You can remember.
Yeah, we just carried on. I think like the numbers did start to go down a little bit, but it became like an attrition. Became like a campaign of attrition, I think, and
just because people were getting tired.
Yeah, that people were getting tired, and obviously the government weren't, they weren't folding really. They were just allowing us to continue.
So people just mouthing up sort of charges but being let out without bail conditions.
Yeah, we weren't even getting we were getting arrested. It was really weird. They were arresting us for conspiracy to cause a public nuisance, which theoretically is like can be quite a serious offence. But then they were just letting us go. They weren't giving us bail conditions. It was like really odd, to be quite honest with you. And then you asked about the break as well, and I think there was a few reasons for that. Actually, Indigo, can you might be able to remember a little bit better about the break. I think one of them was because we needed a break, and there was some other reasons.
It was already weeks, wasn't it, by the time you did that?
It was classic. It was, I can't remember what week it was, probably like after the 4th, something like that. I'll have to write this out after. I'm realizing I should know more, but we were knackered. We were like, we have to have a break. Like, some people by the end had 14 charges against them, so you know that's like a week in custody basically. Anyway, so so we were like, we're telling you a secret here, guys, you know, but we have to have this break. And then we say, all right, we give the government a warning, and it's the week before COP. Like, you need to make this, give them an ultimatum. You need to make some serious legislation on insulating Britain, or, you know, we're going to return to the road in 10 days. Must have been 2 weeks before COP. Anyway, and this one, I think, was one of the times we realized, like, we've broken through something by just repeating this over and over again, because it was like headlines, Insulate Britain are having a week off. I was like, I've never had a campaign where the media are reporting that we're not doing anything. And then people will go, oh, very clever, giving them an ultimatum, you know, giving them a bit of time to think about it. And then some miracle, the heating building strategy came out, didn't include anything on insulation, but did include stuff about boilers and some good stuff on boilers. Anyway, it needs to happen, but it's not happening quick enough, or, you know, and then then we just returned back to the road after the 10 days of break. And then to finish the story, I suppose, although it's still not over, we had the 10 days of break. Then we went we basically by this point we had an injunction on the M25. We'd been to the port of Dover. They put an injunction on Dover. We'd started doing the artery roads out of the M25 and also inside the M25, because some people aren't in a situation where they're willing to break this injunction. So then they put the injunctions on these other motorways, and then we went UK wide. So we had a block in relatively small blocks, but a block in Manchester, and then there's swarming in Birmingham, and then also stuff happening in London. So they've gone UK wide now. And then they put this injunction on the whole of the strategic road network. So it's just like, although in some ways it's, oh my God, this is awful. We're there isn't going to be a road you can protest on anymore. What we're trying to do is to tease out this implicit violence that's within the state all the time, and this repression that is happening to us all the time. We're just invisible to it. So the government are overreaching their power. They basically said you can't protest on any road in all of the UK, even though lots of the rights that we enjoy today are as a result of protest. And I think you start to see a shift in people thinking, God, they're bad, but are they that bad? And are they, I could show you the pile of injunctions that have been sent to me, delivered to me. Wait there.
Just while Indy's gone as well, like the other thing during the break, we had we've got the Daily Mail, which is like one of the kind of like right-wing papers here in the UK, and they came to like an MVDA with like I think it was the Mail or the Sun, I can't remember, one of them, and like secretly recorded the MVDA, and somebody, Dave in the MVDA, said that once we come back from the break we're going to unleash hell, and it became this like, we weren't doing anything, and it became this like huge story like on the right wing. We were just as busy like in the media when we weren't on the road than when we were on it. It was really odd. It was strange. They were kind of they were working for us in loads of ways. And just sorry, Indigo's back now.
I've just had a bit of a Mr. Bean moment, and my shelving unit has actually fallen over because of the weight of the injunctions. So I'm wishing I didn't do that, but it's like this much. And then
and just on the injunctions, they're pretty serious, aren't they? I was speaking to someone and she was saying that like it's not a magistrate, it's not a jury trial. You go straight to the High Court.
You go straight to the High Court without a jury, and then you get sent to prison. It's like breaching an injunction is like when they don't have a law that they want to throw at you, the government creates a law, or no, it's not even the government. It has to be like a private individual. So in this case, it's the National Highways Limited, as instructed by our government, to create a piece of law to stop you going somewhere. Like normally in the UK, I've heard of them for protests against like fracking sites. So that's like oil drilling. So then that company will create an injunction against specific individuals or persons unknown. And then they're able to go after your assets. They're able to give you prison time. It's like really horrible.
And almost unlimited fines, is that right? Or costs. Combination of fines and costs. Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. I don't even know that we've got anything like that in Australia.
We do. They've been used against from the National Call people. They're still on an injunction after 5 years, and actually some of them breached it in the recent actions.
Okay, there you go. All right. Anyway, so you had your break, and by then COP was sort of just about happening, right? And was that when you did the one at Parliament, just to show that it didn't really work?
Yeah, and then our last action, I think, was at Parliament that day. I think there was about 60-something people who blocked the roads outside Parliament, and lo and behold, then they injunct the roads outside of Parliament. So it's like, and then people were getting committal papers, which is when they've breached that injunction and were being sent to, had court date, and then the first 9 of those went in. They've been sentenced to between 3 and 6 months in prison. And then the Saturday after that, there was a more like, it wasn't just an Insulate Britain protest, it was like a come out in anger against this unjust government sort of protests, and we blocked a bridge in central London and another key junction. People were arrested there, and then we have the next 9 on the 14th going into court, and there will be others to come, but some people who never breached the injunction but have gone out millions of times. There's actually about between 35 and 40 people who've breached it, so they'll be going into prison. And then our campaign is continuing to support them. There will be actions that continue, but not anywhere near on that sort of scale, and not necessarily even on the road. That's Insulate Britain. And then we're like incubating a new idea now.
So do you want to add something?
Yeah. Before we end up going all the way to the end, there was a really interesting kind of, I guess it was a decision to be made at some point. But basically, because the campaign started with, you're gonna have a 3-day action cycle, so I think it was 2-day, where you go action and then chill and then action or something, for each individual, right, and each group. At some point, well, I think it was, I know you can tell me when, but maybe like 3 weeks in or something, you sort of figured out or decided or something that you're on the second page of the media, whether you do an action every day or you do an action every 4 days. And so what ended up, and then my understanding is you ended up pivoting at some point to an action Monday and Friday. Can you talk to me about, what's that was interesting.
Oh God, my bookcase. I think it's like we had loads of different versions, and it was about resource more than anything. But yeah, everyone interpreted it as like a very strategic move that we were doing, and I think a more interesting conversation that was happening for me was in about this 3rd week, where it was like, we've done this same action over and over and over again, and there's some people who want to stop, some people who want to continue as it is, and some people who want to escalate more, and you want to hold everyone together because we need everyone. And what we did, although we were jumping around with the highway and the roundabout, and that was another ongoing conversation because there's different levels of risk and commitment involved in that. We did more or less just stay on this middle ground of and what I think happens is, even though we stayed on the middle ground, the conversation around us changed.
And look, I mean, the original idea was you were just going to keep going and going and going until you won. But I mean, I'm guessing after a few weeks, it was getting to be clear that that was going to be hard.
Yeah, I think so. And then obviously the injunction came in, and I think possibly we could have carried on. And I think it was interesting in terms of what you said, we had the 9 people that were sent to prison, the kind of rally that was organised, it wasn't strictly by Insulate Britain, it was, and not even Extinction Rebellion, it was like a separate group. But it was amazing the amount of people that I spoke to that had never been arrested and came out to sit on the road that day. So that was like really interesting. The kind of backfiring effect does happen, and it's also this idea that, because we've obviously had James Brown and he's a really respected person, it's really weird that it didn't quite take off in that way. And this idea that there's this like exponential effect of numbers, that when you've got 10, it does create this backfiring effect. And so yeah, we got loads of data back on that does happen. So that was encouraging. So
the data was to do with people, how many people came out on the street? Is that when you say you got loads of data? Do you want to just tell us some of it? Like, is it to do with people joining Insulate Britain, or is it to do with this broader movement that's sort of forming? Like, yeah, obviously that moment where sort of Extinction Rebellion and everyone else sort of all came and said, like, we're going to fight this injunction. We're all going to sit on the road. I mean, that obviously is an important part of it. But is there more to it than that? Like more backfire effect that you can see?
Yeah, I think what we noticed is, like politically, Insulate Britain has been quite sensitive politically within the movement. Lots of people, lots of quite influential people have had a bit of a problem with Insulate Britain, and this was a theme throughout the campaign. And it was really interesting because loads of local groups and regions were supportive, and then it was the odd person that wasn't. And what we found was that when they'd gone to prison and they organised this day of action, it wiped, how can I say this? Like the influential people's grasp on trying to not support Insulate Britain, basically that they kind of couldn't really hold on to it anymore, and it broke away. So we saw like support. It wasn't just about Insulate Britain, but I think what was interesting was it was the backfiring effect of the people going to prison. So there was kind of solidarity in that, and I think so that was interesting. And the data just was the amount of people that decided to get arrested for the first time. They'd been doing other things in the movement, well-being, etc. But it was the injustice of that really pushed them on. So I think that was the really interesting part of it. Don't know what Indigo thinks on that stuff as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And look, I heard this view that you used like very working class sort of people as spokespeople, right? And I think the idea was to try and reach out to the working class. I heard this opinion, I don't know whether you agree, that you tried to reach out to the working class, but actually you were successful in reaching out to the left. Who do you think you reached?
I think it's hard to say because the media is so controlled by a certain group of people that there's only certain voices who are ever on the media. There's only certain voices who are screaming out really loudly on Twitter, and you've got a really clear barometer on what those guys are thinking all the time. But I think whether or not it did or didn't reach out to the working class, you've only ever got a very small data pool to know. Like obviously they weren't joining on the street in some mad huge uprising. That definitely didn't happen, and definitely there is a lot of hate or distaste around Insulate Britain. But I think I remember someone, Jackie, who's in Newcastle, and she's got this like YouTube clip of her going around just speaking to people in the market about what they think of Insulate Britain, and I've got sort of stories just from me chatting, and it's like about the Liam storming out video, which is storming out of Good Morning Britain. It's like although everyone can slam it in the press, there's like a sort of there's an identification that this guy isn't the normal guy who's on the media, and he's doing something like I would do if someone was having a go at me that hard. And it's like perhaps there's cogs whirring about how you can break open this sort of space that's normally open to a certain type of people. I think it didn't, it wasn't like, I'm definitely not saying it did really amazingly well at what we wanted to do, but I think it definitely got closer to it, and it's definitely made people realise that if we want to communicate successfully about the climate crisis, we can't be doing it with like the university professionals talking about parts per million or point whatever degrees, because it has no relation to anyone's life.
I was saying before we started, we
Liam,
did
what
a
do you
whole,
think? You'll know
we did a
better.
whole training video on how to talk to the right-wing media, looking at the amazing sort of ups and downs of your media campaign. Do you want to comment, Liam?
Yeah, I think the left did actually. It was interesting. We got kind of like quiet support, I would say, from the left, and it kind of exploded in the 6th and 7th week. And there was some really interesting. We've got like a couple of like left-wing commentators that do appear on these kind of like right-wing shows, and they came out quite vocally in support. We had the Cameron, the concrete kind of clip that went viral. I think it's got like 11.5 million views on Twitter. And
do you want to just describe it in case anyone hasn't seen it? Just because I'd love to show it. Yeah, do you want to just describe it? Because not everyone probably in Australia has seen it. Just describe what happened.
No, it's just this. We've got this guy, Mike Graham, on talk radio, who's just like incredibly obnoxious, and basically tried to make a fool of our spokesperson, Cameron, and basically just came off worse off by, huge amount, by saying that
because Cameron's a
carpenter, and he said that it's a sustainable material, and said you can't grow concrete, and Mike Graham said that you can, and there was just this amazing silence in the interview, and I think that weirdly helped, and there's things like that you can't predict, but I think like we had this structure in the first 2 weeks. We had our 3 points, and we did a really good job, all of us. Like we drilled the first 3 points. You didn't leave an interview without saying like 5 points, and it was best value for money for reducing emissions. Insulation gives best value for money for reducing emissions, hundreds of thousands of proper meaningful jobs, and bring millions out of fuel poverty. Boris needs to just get on with the job. And there was one more that I've forgotten, that I shouldn't have forgotten. And that sort of developed, as I said, like basically, what was interesting with the media campaign was like how vicious they went through. And basically we like, I was speaking to people in the media, and they were amazed that we were going back on, and we were saying like, look, we're right. You can't talk, you're not acknowledging, like, people were talking about ambulances and hypothetical ambulances that may or may not get through. And I'm there saying, I've just said to you that 10 million people are going to fry to death. And I would repeat it, like, are you not listening to what I'm saying? Do you know what I mean? And then we would like, and then we went into this other stage of just like refusing to answer questions. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But I think like the massive like lesson is like, don't retreat. Just don't retreat. Just keep going on, and just keep like, just keep hammering the message that it's psychopathic in nature in terms of their refusal to acknowledge the emotional weight of what you're saying to people on these programs, and they can't connect to it. And I think, me personally, I feel like my thing that I can improve on is like, I went in angry sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And I think we had an amazing interview with George Monbiot, who's like a commentator who broke down in tears on Good Morning Britain, and that was amazing as well. And they didn't know how to handle that. And the other thing that I'll stop talking now because I've been banging on for ages. There's so much in the media. You could write a thesis and Insulate Britain on the media.
I think we've got to get you back again just on the media, just alone. But
the really interesting thing, this is what I was talking about, the press releases earlier, is that we wrote these press releases, and literally The Sun, which is like the biggest right-wing paper in the UK, basically they get credited with whoever they support as Prime Minister, they get voted in. They literally were copying and pasting our press releases into their paper, you know, talking about the demands, talking about, you know, non-violent civil resistance, talking about people were going to suffer because of the climate crisis. And so, yeah, we saw this amazing ability to get what we wanted to written into the newspapers of this country, which again was like really, and that went on for 7 weeks. So that was the government's refusal to remand us. Consequently, we got 7 weeks of media coverage and the ability to talk to the British public about the seriousness of the situation that we're all in.
So yeah, just maybe moving on to the post-reflection. I mean, you're sort of still in the middle of it, but have you had a get-together where you go, well, what do we think of how that went? You know, did that work, or are you just basically still too much in the middle of it? Indy, do you want to have a go?
We had a party last weekend. Does that
That's good.
count?
But is kind of sort of being pleased with how it's gone?
Yeah, like obviously it's, you know, there's been family arguments and there's been breakups and people had to quit their jobs, and like there's been, you know, like undeniably extremely stressful situations with the police, and there's these looming court cases, like, but the kind of feeling within the groups and the people that I'm speaking to is like, you know, people are saying it's one of the best things they've ever done in their life, you know, to be living that fully and to be committing so fully with your actions to what you believe, and to be meeting people who think likewise, and to be creating a national conversation is, you know, like I say, we're not doing enough, but we're getting in the ballpark of feeling like it's happening. So the, yeah, people are feeling okay.
Yeah, question, Serge?
Yeah, can you just reiterate like what your numbers were and how they actually went for that thing? Because it seemed like it sort of ended up dipping, which was interesting, but we're still having a lot of impact. Yeah, and also because I'm just impressed that, you know, of how much effect you had with actually not that many people ultimately.
Yeah, so we had like 100 and I can't remember, it got up to like 160 or something people who signed that form. It's like on Action Network, and so we were really optimistic for the first day that we were definitely going to get that 120, but actually there was 93 people who went out on the first day, and then it stayed at over 90 for like the first week and a half or so, and then I think it dipped below, and then it dipped lower. People were going away, recuperating, coming back. Some people going away because that was enough and they don't want to risk more criminal charges, but wait, so we had 6 block teams. We kept with 6 block teams for quite a while, and then there was another team that was like in campaign recruitment we planned for, so if people were going to see it on the news on the first week and then want to join, we had another team that came in that merged with the team with lower. Basically we stayed at 6 teams for a few weeks, I think, and then we were dipping much lower, and people were going out not 3 times in a week but 2 times in a week, but even with 30 people, the fact that we were going back out again still kept the story alive.
So have you got more people now, like have more come since, and do you want to just now tell us anything you know about where you're headed to?
Yeah, we've got so the core team was really small, and then loads of people came on for the action, and we had this philosophy, like everyone who's involved in the core team has to be willing to do the action. I don't know whether we're going to do the same thing next time or not, but that's a discussion to be had. And then we've got now a lot more people who are willing to give a lot more time to the organisation of it. So I have this sense it's going to be bigger, but we're aiming to do something in spring this year, which is really quite close. So it's going to be a real challenge to pull something off the ground that quickly. And we'll keep lots of the kind of messaging stuff that we've learned, but we're aiming to call out fossil fuels more directly, perhaps something to do with the North Sea oil. But we've also got these ongoing court cases with some like super amazing people, including myself and Liam, who are probably going to be in prison soon. So how it's all going to come together, I don't know. But it will.
Okay. And that's just in 4 or 5 months from now, you'll have the next sort of surge. Oh, and Serge's got something to show. Do you want to? Oh,
Yeah.
I might have to make you first, do I?
Oh no, all good.
All right.
All right, so yeah, got the Google Trends up. So this is Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain. So Extinction Rebellion, just because that's the thing. Past 5 years, just because anyway, whatever. So Insulate Britain at its peak was this like 42% of the maximum that in Extinction Rebellion was, which was in October, the Worldwide Rebellion in October. And then there was the April Rebellion, which was 70% of what Insulate Britain achieved on its maximum point. So anyway, I just wanted to share that in terms of, what there was 100 so people doing that in terms of the amount of momentum nationally.
So when you do this fossil fuel thing, I mean, is it still going to be roads, or is it going to be, or if you'd rather not say, don't, but, or is it going to be something more like, like we did with Blockade Australia in the port, or is it that not decided or not public?
We have decided it, but it's not been communicated properly with lots of people yet, so we won't talk about it here.
No. Okay. Anyway, it sounds very, very exciting. All right. Liam, have you got any last reflections on whether it worked, how it felt, how you survived going back and being battered by the press time and time again? Like, I don't know. Sometimes it looked like you're enjoying it, but anyway, just any last concluding reflections?
Yeah, just yeah, I think, I was just thinking about like what Indigo said. We did have like an in-campaign recruitment, and I think that did work to some extent. I think we had like a bit of a, I think we just had like a personnel, just having people to help with that process. And I think there is more people coming into that now to help. And I think like, I think the idea at the moment as it stands is for us, or yeah, whatever the iteration is to go in before the kind of Extinction Rebellion or other groups decide to do something, because of this effect potentially. If we achieve what we'd like to achieve, which is to have 100 plus people in prison, ideally 300 to 400 people in prison, then it can create a historic backfiring effect in terms of mobilizing a much more significant number of people to the kinds of things that Extinction Rebellion did in April and October in 2019, which is like around 10,000 people. Obviously, we need hundreds of thousands of people at least on the streets of London for a concerted amount of time in order to sort of force the first bit of legislative change. That's what we're aiming for, is to really get them to concede to something concrete. But yeah, I think like in terms of how I feel about it all, I haven't really processed it all, I don't think. But I think we learned loads. I think it's been really valuable. I think what I was thinking at the start, which was this, you know, in terms of like what April did, in terms of April here in the UK in 2019, in terms of moving the Overton window around this idea that there's an emergency, and we saw the conversation really shift worldwide, really, in terms of everybody really sort of understanding that there was an emergency. But then I think what Insulate Britain's really done here in the UK, and I think other groups are doing it around the world, including you guys in Australia, obviously, is talking about the next Overton window shift is like forcing the general public to understand that you can't just say that it's an emergency. And that was a bit of messaging that we were putting out in the last sort of few weeks, is like, this now become a binary choice about whether you go into resistance and you do something good in your life, or whether you're complicit in evil. And this is and the other thing is that the task is huge. Like, people are like in denial, and I think even in the climate movement, people are in denial about how much of a shit show this is and what needs to be done in order to turn it round. And I think this Insulate Britain campaign, you know, really did that. And it talked about fuel poverty. It linked social justice and climate in a really cool way. We had a person that's going into prison potentially on the 14th of December, who he was a homeless advocate, works for homeless people in his community, and he's gone to prison purely on the injustice of fuel poverty. And there was a few people like that in this campaign. So yeah, that's what I'm proud of, is that we really sort of like, we've got that conversation going. And I think like when the controversy of Insulate Britain dies down, what you'll be left with is the no-brainer that we were asking for, that would have just like helped every single person in this country. So yeah, that will live, I believe, especially as we go into the winter. Fuel poverty is already we've got an energy crisis here in the UK. Bills are really they're doubling. So it's going to be a massive thing this winter here in the UK. And we've got people that have been trying to talk about this stuff for 30 years and they haven't been able to. And they've been able to talk about fuel poverty and insulation because of our campaign. So yeah, disruption works, even when they say it doesn't.
Oh, well, that's a good uplifting punchline, I reckon. So maybe we just sign off there and just, you know, with a great big thank you to both of you for getting up early in the morning to talk to us late at night. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's so nice to be in a space with you, Jane and Sergio. It's just yeah, really feels cool to be connected at such a long distance, but still, yeah, have the opportunity to speak to you. So thanks so much for asking us.